Derren, could you begin by telling me what cold reading is and how it's used?
Cold reading, I suppose, is the way that a complete stranger can seemingly tell you everything about yourself without being psychic and without knowing anything about you. In essence, the cold reader or psychic is supplying a lot of words, and you as the sitter, the other person, is supplying the meaning to those words. And it relies on a lot of techniques. It's not really a question of forensic body reading and the sort of things that people might... It's not really normally even that clever. There are linguistic tricks which, unless you're aware of them, are very easy to fall for. And those tricks can give the impression that the person knows everything about your character, or might refer to facts and things from your life or from your past that they seemingly couldn't know about.
So if a psychic, a so-called psychic, a trickster, was trying to pretend to guess, I don't know, the name of the sitter's grandfather or something like that, what would be the kind of thing they might do?
Well, very often, I mean, even guessing the name of a grandfather, if you back up, what tends to happen is that the psychic will, if it's with a group of people, throw out a name and say, I'm getting the name John or Albert or some name that's sort of suitable for the age group they're working with. And now that name could refer to a person in the audience who's living, or it could refer to someone that's died, or it could be a friend of the person. It really could be anything. So it's up to somebody to pick up on it and turn it into what they want it to be. And of course, if they say, yes, that was my husband, then the reader can go, yes, that's right, he's here, he's saying he still loves you, or whatever that is. And they turn it back into, make it sound as if they were saying it was your husband, when in fact it could have been anybody. It could have been the name of the person that was sat there. The kind of methods that involved... the Brownem statement's very sort of famous and well known about, and there's a great experiment.
Remind us what the Brownem...
Yeah, well, there's a terrific experiment that was done on this with students. I've filmed this myself. We did it with 3 different groups of people across the world, where you have everybody in the group is given a reading, a personality reading, and normally beforehand there's some nonsense about asking for their birth date or getting some objects off them. So there's some sort of process apparently involved, and they're given a reading, and it's a long reading. It's a very detailed personality reading, and they all get one individually. They're all asked to read it, and invariably they will all say afterwards that it's very, very accurate, that it was not at all vague or ambiguous of what people might expect, and they'll give it 85, 90, 95% accuracy. I've seen this happen, and people are amazed by it. And then you get them to swap with each other. And so perhaps you can identify someone else by their reading, then they realise they've all been given exactly the same thing. Which was written months ago before I even met them, And the statements that fill those sorts of readings are generally Brownem statements. And Brownem statements are things which essentially apply to anybody. This is only part of the cold reading skill, but it's a major part of it.
It comes from P.T. Brownem, the circus proprietor,
That's
who
right.
said, we have something for everybody.
Something for everyone, that's right.
Okay.
And famously, a sucker was born every minute.
Yes.
So these are statements along the lines of, you're somebody who... you tend to keep people a little bit at bay, but when...
You're a caring person.
Yeah, you're a caring, you keep people a little bit at bay there. You tend to keep people at arm's length, but when you allow people into that inner sanctum of, when they become your close friends, if they betray you, then that really hurts, And you're not saying anything other than you're closer to people that you're close to. Then it means nothing, absolutely nothing.
Yes. And horoscopes are the same. I mean, they use the same principle.
Because those things have to apply to anybody, because there's no interaction going on. A horoscope or something given, when everyone's getting the same thing. There's no feedback, so you're simply relying on things that apply to anybody. What you can do when you're interacting with somebody is you can fork off from one way or another. Be careful I say that. You can go one way or the other depending on the response you get. So if I said to you that the spirits are telling me you've got quite a temper, you could answer yes or no to that. You might agree or disagree. Now, if you agree with it, it feels like a hit, and I can say yes, that's right. I can sense that you've got a real temper. ... If you say no, I can say. Well, not on the outside. I mean, what you've done is you've learned how to sort of keep that very contained, but inside you'll be aware that there are some things that really kind of knock you up and make you very angry, but what's great about you is that you've learned to control that on the outside. It still feels like a hit. Linguistically, what they tend to do is they say, they put the word not into the question, so they'll say things like, one recent reading I was listening to was, she said, now you you haven't been drinking a lot of water recently, have you? And by phrasing it in the negative, it allows a yes or no to be a hit. And the answer was no, and she said, well, you should do. The Spirit's telling me you need to be drinking more than you are. You haven't been drinking much. And it sounded like a hit. Equally, if the person said yes, it would have seemed like, yes, they're telling me, either way. Then a common ruse also is to make statements that allow you to have both sides of the coin in one go. So, for example, if I said to you, you've got an extrovert side and an introvert side, that's not remotely convincing at all. That seems to be a given. But if you say to somebody, when you're at a party, you're very good at being able to hold court. You can entertain people. You're very good at being really the life and soul of a party. But what's interesting about you is that when you walk away from that, you'll often find yourself at home running back through conversations in your head and wondering, oh, what did that person mean? Why did I say that? That was stupid. And when you're even at those parties, even though you like to think that you're somebody who can be in charge and very charismatic, you'll often find yourself just stood there thinking, God, why am I here? It's like everyone is a million miles away, and you're aware that that is a facade that you put on. Now, whether or not that applies to you, the fact is, all I'm doing is saying that you've got an introvert and an extrovert side, which cancels itself out. It means nothing. And yet most people will find a way of sort of making that easily fit themselves.
Now, when you analyse these things like the Barnum effect and cold reading, you're doing it in a sort of rational way. I take it that the psychics and palm readers and astrologers and people who do it know perfectly well what they're doing, and therefore they are fakes. But are all of them fakes, or do some of them somehow manage to fool themselves as well?
I think the difference is how good they are at it, which is unfair in a way, because maybe it becomes... or maybe
the good ones are the fakes?
I think the difference is you can see when cold reading's at work, when you know the tricks, when you know the same old things coming out about. You've got an old box of photographs at home with and you've got the sort of the tricks that they come out with, and the pushing for statements, making somebody make a statement hit, and if they don't, moving on to the next person. One I was listening to recently, you've been doing a lot of spirit telling me you've been doing a lot of sewing. And that woman was like, no. She said, well, is it somebody in the spirit plane who's been doing a lot of sewing? No, she couldn't make a hit. And so went to the next person, is it for you? You've been doing a lot of sewing? And the woman was, no. She said, well, there's a coat, you've got a coat at home with, there's a button that's loose or a hem that's loose. No. I mean, it wasn't working. And in the end she said, well, have a look for that, my dear. They're telling me there's a and it went from somebody with, to nothing. So when you see that, that's clearly that person they know exactly what they're doing. They're desperately trying to get a hit. However, I think the people that are, I've been to psychic training colleges and seen people that are very sincerely trying to learn. They've been told they believe that they're a bit psychic because, we all have a certain amount of intuition, and we all, if we misunderstand things like kind of coincidence and a phone ringing because we've been thinking of somebody earlier on that day and the phone rings and it's them, we might mistake that for being psychic if we don't really understand how those things can easily happen quite a lot of the time. So I think there are plenty of people who learn it genuinely and really think that, whether it's palm reading or tarot cards or whatever, that there really is a system.
But and they go to a training course.
These things do exist. But equally, you can buy books on it nowadays.
Yeah.
I mean,
but I'm just trying to get into the mind of one of the instructors on the training course. I mean, the instructors on the training course are teaching cold reading while dressing it up as though it was genuine. So they really are charlatans then.
I think so. I think so. It's difficult because cold reading is something that you can be taught to do without it seeming like tricks.
Okay.
I've been in a situation where trainee psychics are sat around saying things to each other like, I'm sensing there's... some of the great things I heard was, I'm sensing you're on a bus and the bus is going the wrong way, but it might not be a bus, it might be a relationship. And when you're hearing things like that, you think, well, okay, this isn't cold reading, this is just people sort of hypothesising intuition and just learning to I'll just speak openly, and I know this other person's going to make it fit because we're all partisan and we're all learning together. And that just seems sort of naive and a bit of a shame.
When they're learning it all together, they're still dressing it up in their own minds as the spirit world talking to them, rather than...
Absolutely. But all it is it's just being intuitive and being open and being... just say what you feel. That's all it is. It's this whole thing of intuiting your way to enlightenment and knowledge, which is, a potentially disastrous way of thinking. As for what the teachers are teaching them, I can only imagine that the teachers who are maybe more media savvy, more sort of career psychics and mediums, are very aware of what's going on and very aware of what the tricks are. But it's difficult to tell. But yes,
I've heard it suggested that sometimes these rather lucrative acts that people put on of psychic divination and things often start out as a kind of folie à deux, that somebody and his partner or his father or something kind of manage to convince each other that they can do something that they can't, and they sort of rev each other up. And then when they sort of realise that they're not quite as good as they thought, they kind of, each one tries to help the other one, because they in some sense genuinely believe it. Have you ever come across that?
And are you talking about psychic performers?
So I think I'm talking about psychic performers who actually use conjuring tricks and pretend that they're not, but still kind of half believe in that they really are psychic, because once they had a really good success, which was a genuine accident or something, and so they're encouraged by this folie à deux partnership, and maybe the partner rigs it so that even the performer thinks he's getting hits which he's really not, that kind of thing.
I think the more common route, I think there are two common routes. One is the magician who crosses over to the dark side, who knows what he's doing but realises there's more money to be made in psychic readings than there is in doing tricks.
We all know examples of that.
We all know examples. There's plenty of that around.
Yeah.
The other route, the sort of the stage medium, going back to sort of Doris Stokes very famously, are sort of normally from showbiz stock, have normally been taught the skills by people from that world that they just see it as part of performance, as part of showbiz. And again, I think those are skills that are then turned rather ugly. But that's a very common route as well. I think very rarely, I think, is there any real belief in it, other than the fact that if you are spending your life lying to people, how do you deal with that other than rationalise it in your own head after a while and decide, well, I do kind of believe in it, and I do believe that intuition, it may not be psychic, but I do believe that I'm intuitive, and that maybe that does give me an insight and it comforts people. And you start to rationalise it and maybe create a sort of a loose belief around it that follows after the fact. But I think very few people get into it at that level from any kind of sincere beginnings.
They do make a lot more money by pretending to be psychic than they do by frankly admitting that they are conjurers.
Yes, it's a huge racket, and there's a very fine line to be tread. I mean, in my world, I'm sort of, on the one hand, trying to create a magic illusion, on the other hand, wanting to be honest about it as well, and kind of show people a bit of what it is. It's a difficult line to tread, and I think if you're morally really not too fussed about it, it comes down to, a lot of the justification that psychics give is that it comforts people. And my feeling on that is, well, if they're lies, who are you to decide that your lies are what people need to hear to comfort them? And I think it's a twisted logic. And I think that the reason is, if you've lost somebody dear to you, and I'm trampling all over those memories by telling you that they're here now saying this and that. I mean, that's none of my business, and if I'm just doing it because I can earn some money out of it, and when you watch these people at work, so much of it is ego. I mean, some of the mediums at these spiritualists, especially the ones that aren't so good, they just look like second-rate stage hypnotists that you might see in a pub or in Corfu or something. It's horrendous, and it's that I find really quite ugly.
Michael Shermer, in one of his books, has a story about how I think he was on stage with a medium who was calling up spirits and talking to people about what their dead relatives said. And Shermer unmasked it. He explained on stage about cold reading, told the audience how it was done. And afterwards, several people in the audience came up absolutely furious with him because he had shattered their illusions. And they seemed... It wasn't because he shattered other people's illusions, it was that he shattered theirs. I mean, somehow it was thought to be cruel when people were deriving comfort and consolation from being deceived in this way. It was cruel to break that deception.
It's a question of sensitivity, isn't it? I mean, I think in the bigger picture, it's crueler to be taken in by that deception. It's crueler if you're somebody who is... I've known cases of people that have lost a child that's so dear to them, and they cannot get over the fact they've lost the child and become addicted to these charlatans, you know, for want of a better word, and that to me is as cruel as it can be. Now, how you handle, I don't see it as a mission to, you know, turn every believer into a non-believer, but I think it's important to get that message out so people can take it on board and understand it and have more information, because if you have more information you can make better decisions. But on an individual basis, I think, yes, you have to be terribly sensitive in how you handle that, and I think maybe sometimes in some desperate situations you decide, well, maybe it's better left. Maybe that person should just have that you know, illusion and live with it. I don't know.
I'm going to go to a séance where a medium will no doubt call up dead relatives of people in the audience and things. And can you give me some tips to what to look out for, what kind of tricks to be aware of? Because I'm naive in this. I'm untrained, and it would be good to have some sort of psychology wisdom to look out for.
I think you'll find it probably disappointingly transparent. I think with spiritualist services, a big difference is that the medium doesn't really have to do any work because he's got a whole room of believers, and that's the difference. If you approach any psychic with any sort of scepticism, you'll see through pretty much all of it, unless they happen to get lucky, you know. If you go there as a believer, of course you're going to want to make everything fit, and if you're going to a church service every Tuesday, or I think it's normally Tuesday they do these things on, and you're desperate, maybe this will be the week that the medium will get in touch with Albert or whoever, you know, whoever I've lost. You'll do everything to grab at it. So they don't have to really do a lot of work. And if it's something you also have to be aware of, if it's a group that the medium is familiar with, he'll know a lot of their stories already. And a very common thing with TV psychics is that when the cameras are off, they have a chat with people in the audience and find out who would like someone to come. Anybody I should be looking at.
As transparent as that, is it? I mean, they don't even have stooges in the audience to even do it themselves.
What they often do is they bring their own clients with them. You know, they say, "Oh, come along to the filming because I think something's really going to come through on that day."
Oh.
Pick the ones that cry a lot and bring them along on filming. But very commonly, before filming starts, they come out, have a chat with the audience, because they're all believers. Is there anybody you've lost someone who drowned? And okay, well, if anybody comes through that's drowned, I'll know that'll be for you.
Okay.
You know, so much that work is done.
It's just so easy, isn't it, when you think about it?
Oh, it's tremendous. Yeah. When you're then actually doing when you're there and the thing is happening, the things to listen out for, it varies from medium to medium, and they all have their different styles. The best ones just keep talking. They know the value of just really not stopping and just bulldozing over any response from the audience. The worst ones pause too much. They get in too much discussion. They're found out. It's creating the illusion to the whole room that the medium's hitting one thing after another. Whereas if you really pay attention to what the person's saying, very often you'll just see they look a bit bemused and a bit bewildered. That does tend to happen. Again, depends on the style of the medium. The most common pattern is going to be throwing out a sort of a half statement, that kind of thing of, you know, have you lost, you know, maybe throwing out a name is the simplest thing. You know, I'm getting the name Albert. Does that mean anything? Can anybody find that for me? Albert, someone over here, or is it the lady over there? Then, you know, and then the person in the audience will supply the information back. Yes, that was my husband. Okay. And then you get the medium will add that information. Now she knows it's the husband, whereas it could have been anything. It could have been the name of the person in the audience, Albert. It could have been a friend of yours in the audience. It could have been someone that died. It could have been anything. But now she knows it's the husband. She then feeds that back, or he feeds that back by saying, that's right, it's your husband here, and he's telling me that, you know, you're a lovely wife, and moves on as if he'd said it was the husband itself, but he hadn't. Yes. And that is a very common pattern all the way through. You get a statement that's made that's vague. I'm seeing something to do with an accident maybe involving water. You go, yes, that's right, you know, when I was young. And he goes, that's right, he's showing me when you were a kid, and he's saying that he was, even there, he was there looking after you even when that happened. And you're amazed that he's picked up on this memory. Or you say, yes, that's right, the dead person died because of an accident in water. And then I'll say, yes, that's right, he's telling me that that's how he passed away, that he drowned. And I'll turn whatever you say. So I throw out some words, you give me the meaning, and then I carry on, I reiterate, I feed that back to you as if that's what I intended from the start. Or might refer to facts and things from your life or from your past that they seemingly couldn't know about.
So if a psychic, a so-called psychic, a trickster, was trying to pretend to guess, I don't know, the name of the sitter's grandfather or something like that, what would be the kind of thing they might do?
Well, very often, I mean, even guessing the name of a grandfather, if you back up, what tends to happen is that the psychic will, if it's with a group of people, throw out a name and say, I'm getting the name John or Albert or some name that's sort of suitable for the age group they're working with. And now that name could refer to a person in the audience who's living, or it could refer to someone that's died, or it could be a friend of the, really, which essentially apply to anybody. This is only part of the cold reading skill, but it's a major part of it.
It comes from P.T. Barnum, the circus proprietor,
that's
who
right.
said, we have something for everybody.
Something for everyone, that's right.
Okay.
And famously, a sucker was born every minute.
Yes.
So these are statements along the lines of, you're somebody who you tend to keep people a little bit at bay, but when
You're a caring person.
you're a caring. You keep people a little bit at bay. There, you tend to keep people at arm's length. But when you allow people into that inner sanctum of when they become your close friends, if they betray you, then that really hurts. And you're not. And there's some nonsense about asking for their birth date or getting some objects off them. So there's some sort of process apparently involved, and they're given a reading, and it's a long reading. It's a very detailed personality reading, and they all get one individually. They're all asked to read it, and invariably they will all say afterwards that it's very, very accurate, that it was not at all vague or ambiguous of what people might expect, and they'll give it 85, 90, 95% accuracy. I've seen this happen, and people are amazed by it. And then you get them to swap with each other. And so perhaps you can identify someone else by their reading, then they realise they've all been given exactly the same thing. Which was written months ago before I even met them, And the statements that fill those sorts of readings are generally Barnum statements. And Barnum statements are things, it could be anything, so it's up to somebody to pick up on it and turn it into what they want it to be. And of course if they say, yes, that was my husband, then the reader can go, yes, that's right, he's here, he's saying he still loves you, or whatever that is, and they turn it back into, make it sound as if they were saying it was your husband, when in fact it could have been anybody, it could have been the name of the person that was sat there. The kind of methods that involved the Barnum statement's very sort of famous and well known about, and there's a great experiment.
Remind us what the Barnum...
Yeah, there's a terrific experiment that was done on this with students. I've filmed this myself. We did it with 3 different groups of people across the world, where you have everybody in the group is given a reading, a personality reading, and normally before.
Derren, could you begin by telling me what cold reading is and how it's used?
Cold reading, I suppose, is the way that a complete stranger can seemingly tell you everything about yourself without being psychic and without knowing anything about you. In essence, the cold reader or psychic is supplying a lot of words, and you as the sitter, the other person, is supplying the meaning to those words. And it relies on a lot of techniques. It's not really a question of forensic body reading and the sort of things that people might... It's not really normally even that clever. There are linguistic tricks which, unless you're aware of them, are very easy to fall for. And those tricks can give the impression that the person knows everything about your character.